Hey everybody, let's take 5 minutes out of our day and meditate on God's Word together. You would think that the kingdom mission of Jesus would be welcomed by everyone. After all, he was healing the world of sin and sickness and death and injustice and oppression. But it wasn't welcomed by everyone then, and it still isn't welcomed by everyone now. Back then, the traditions of the day were one thing that kept people from welcoming their rightful King Jesus. And today, the same is true. Traditions and opinions of men, if they're not kept in check, can render the kingdom mission of Jesus ineffective. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 9, there's a story that illustrates this. He went on from there and entered their synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand. And they said to him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" So that they might accuse him. He said to them, "Which of you who has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value is a man than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And the man stretched it out, and it was restored healthy like the other. But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him, how to destroy him. The Pharisees could do nothing else but conspire. They were not in power. Even though they were the popular party among the Jewish people, they did not hold much legal power. And some of the Pharisees, one sect of them in particular, were very strict on their interpretation of how to execute the law of Moses. The predominant school of the time of Jesus, of the Pharisees, were the disciples of a guy named Shammai. They were the Shemites. They were quite strict about Sabbath day observation. And they would not even allow people to pray for someone who is sick on the Sabbath day. Others were not so stringent, but these guys were. And so Jesus responds with an argument that goes from the lesser to the greater. He acknowledges there were some Jewish sects, one in particular, they would just leave your ox in the ditch, if it were to happen on the Sabbath day. Most acknowledged this is okay. This is something needful that you should do. Get your ox out of the ditch. And so he says, if you would do that for an animal, how much more should you do it for a human? If you can rescue an animal on the Sabbath day, why would you not rescue a human on the Sabbath day? And so by doing this and healing the man on the Sabbath and sparking this controversy, Jesus tells us some very important things about our relationship to him and his word. The first is, it is important in the kingdom of Jesus to do good. That has to be one of the primary things we do. Jesus, in fact, himself was known for going about doing good. This is how Peter described him to the house of Cornelius in Acts chapter 10. But when we talk about doing good, we don't just mean doing good in general. Jesus did not just do good in general. He did specific good. His ministry was a healing ministry. His ministry was a teaching ministry. He did many, many good things. In fact, his mission statement was a quotation of Isaiah 61, that the Lord's anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. He didn't do good just to do good. Jesus did good to bring the kingdom of heaven into the world. That's the kind of good we're doing. That's the kind of good we want to do. That kingdom focus has to be primary. On the other side of this is that if that's primary, then tradition and opinion have to be secondary. The Pharisees weren't bad guys. They started with good intentions. They had respect for God's word and respect for God himself, but their tradition slowly became primary over God's word. For us, we have to guard against secondary things like our own personal opinions, like our own personal or tribal religious traditions, like our own political ideologies. These things are part of us, and they're not necessarily bad parts of us, but they have to be secondary. If we're not careful, like the Pharisees, those secondary things become primary things. And our identities become more of our opinions, our traditions, our ideologies, than the fact that we are disciples of Jesus Christ and we're about his kingdom business. We have to keep the main thing the main thing. And the ministry of Jesus did this. His ministry was also a teaching ministry. And Jesus was the best storyteller ever. We'll start talking about that the next time we take 5. I'll see you then.